The folder hit the floor. A recruit picked it up and froze at the words, Black Ops, Clearance, Omega. From that moment, they never saw the nurse the same again. Lieutenant Commander Jessica Raven Morgan had been assigned to Naval Special Warfare Training Center Coronado for exactly 4 months. At 5 feet 4 inches with short blonde hair always pulled back in a regulation bun, and piercing blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing while revealing little, she moved through her medical duties with the kind of quiet efficiency that made her blend seamlessly into the background of one of America's most elite training facilities. Her uniform was always pressed to perfection, her medical bag organized with military precision, and her approach to patient care reflected years of clinical experience and professional competence. To the SEAL candidates undergoing the grueling basic underwater demolition/SEAL training program, she was simply their assigned nurse practitioner, competent, reliable, and completely focused on keeping them medically fit for the brutal selection process. The candidates knew her only through routine medical interactions. Ma'am when they needed medical attention, the nurse when they discussed appointments among themselves, or Doc Morgan in the casual way that exhausted trainees refer to medical personnel who patch them up after particularly demanding training evolutions. She maintained professional boundaries that seemed almost clinical, speaking only when necessary for medical purposes and never engaging in the informal conversations that typically developed between medical staff and the warriors they supported. The trainees appreciated her medical expertise, but saw her exactly as she appeared to be, a Navy medical officer whose job was ensuring they remained healthy enough to continue their training. She was support staff, someone whose contribution to their development was important, but entirely separate from the combat training and tactical instruction that would determine whether they earned their SEAL trident. Doc Morgan was medical support, nothing more, someone who kept them operational, while the real military training was conducted by instructors who understood the warrior culture that defined naval special operations. Lieutenant Commander Morgan's background seemed straightforward and entirely consistent with her current role. She had mentioned to curious personnel that she'd completed her medical training through military programs, had previous assignments at various Navy medical facilities, and possessed the advanced certifications required for special operations medical support. Her references to her past were brief and professional, focusing on medical qualifications rather than operational experience. None of the SEAL candidates had ever wondered about her background beyond her obvious competence in emergency medicine and her ability to handle the unique medical challenges of their training program. But assumptions can be dangerous, especially when they're made about people whose true backgrounds remain carefully concealed behind the most routine medical responsibilities. Welcome to Silent Salute, where we discover that the most classified operations often hide behind the most ordinary professional appearances. Before we continue this extraordinary story, tell us in the comments which country you're watching from today. And if you believe that some secrets are revealed through the smallest accidents, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. We're honored to share these remarkable tales with you. Class 341 was in their 8th week of BUD/S training, conducting advanced combat conditioning exercises that pushed candidates to their physical and mental limits. Among the current class was Petty Officer 2nd Class Ryan "Tank" Rodriguez, a former Marine Corps reconnaissance operator who had served 2 combat deployments before applying for SEAL training. Rodriguez was respected by his fellow candidates for his tactical experience and leadership abilities, but like everyone else, he had never questioned the background of the medical personnel who supported their training operations. The incident that would change everything occurred during a routine medical check following an intensive underwater demolition exercise. Several candidates had sustained minor injuries during the training evolution, requiring immediate medical assessment and treatment before they could continue with the program. Lieutenant Commander Morgan was conducting her standard post-exercise medical evaluations, ensuring that all injuries were properly documented and treated according to Naval Special Warfare medical protocols. Rodriguez had sustained a minor cut on his forearm during the underwater exercise and was waiting his turn for medical attention when Lieutenant Commander Morgan approached to begin his assessment. As she reached into her jacket pocket to retrieve her penlight for the examination, a manila folder that had been secured inside her jacket somehow caught on the pocket edge and fell to the concrete floor of the medical facility. The folder hit the ground and opened slightly, revealing documents that were clearly not routine medical paperwork. Rodriguez, who was closest to where the folder had fallen, instinctively bent down to retrieve it for Lieutenant Commander Morgan. But as he picked up the folder, his eye was caught by markings on the document cover that made him freeze in place. In bold red lettering across the top of the folder were the words, Black OPS, Clearance, Omega. Below that, in smaller but equally official text, was a classification marking that Rodriguez recognized from his previous military experience. Compartmented information, special access required. Rodriguez stared at the folder, processing what he was seeing with growing amazement and confusion. Omega clearance was among the highest levels of security classification in the United States military, reserved for operations so sensitive that even acknowledging their existence required special authorization. The fact that Lieutenant Commander Morgan possessed documents with this level of classification suggested a background that was completely different from anything he had imagined about their medical officer. As Rodriguez stood holding the folder, Lieutenant Commander Morgan looked up from her medical supplies and immediately noticed what had happened. Her professional composure remained intact, but there was a subtle change in her expression that suggested recognition that something significant had just been revealed. "Thank you, Petty Officer Rodriguez," she said calmly, extending her hand to retrieve the folder. "I'll take that back." But Rodriguez's military experience had taught him to recognize classified materials, and the implications of what he had seen were too extraordinary to simply ignore. The medical officer who had been treating routine training injuries was carrying documents that indicated involvement in the most highly classified military operations conducted by the United States. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said respectfully, "I couldn't help but notice the classification markings on this folder. Is this something I should report through security channels?" Lieutenant Commander Morgan's response revealed that she understood the significance of what had been accidentally disclosed, and that some explanation would be necessary to address Rodriguez's legitimate security concerns. "Petty Officer Rodriguez," she replied carefully, "those documents relate to previous assignments that required security clearances different from my current medical responsibilities. The classification markings you observed are legitimate, but the contents are not related to current SEAL training operations." Rodriguez's curiosity was overwhelming, but his military training had taught him to respect classification protocols and security procedures. However, the disconnect between Lieutenant Commander Morgan's current role and the security level of the documents she carried was so extraordinary that he felt compelled to understand what kind of previous assignments would require Omega clearance for a medical officer. "Ma'am," Rodriguez asked, "if you don't mind me asking, what kind of medical assignments require that level of security classification?" Lieutenant Commander Morgan seemed to be weighing how much information to share, understanding that Rodriguez's discovery of the classified folder had created a situation that required some explanation while maintaining operational security for information that remained classified. Previous assignments involved medical support for operations where traditional security classifications were insufficient to protect the sensitivity of the missions and personnel involved, she explained. Some military medical responsibilities require security clearances that exceed standard medical practice. But Rodriguez's military experience told him that Omega clearance was not granted for routine medical support, regardless of how sensitive the assignment might be. Personnel who possessed that level of security access were typically involved in the most classified and dangerous operations conducted by Special Operations Forces. The conversation was interrupted when Chief Petty Officer Williams, the senior medical instructor, approached to check on the status of the post-exercise medical evaluations. Williams noticed the obvious tension between Rodriguez and Lieutenant Commander Morgan and asked if there were any issues that required his attention. "Chief," Rodriguez said, "I accidentally saw some classification markings on documents that Lieutenant Commander Morgan was carrying. I want to make sure I'm handling this appropriately from a security standpoint." Chief Williams looked at Lieutenant Commander Morgan with obvious curiosity and concern. Security violations were serious matters that could affect the entire training program, and any compromise of classified information required immediate investigation and reporting. "Lieutenant Commander," Williams said, "can you clarify the nature of the classified materials and whether there's been any security compromise?" Lieutenant Commander Morgan's response reflected familiarity with security protocols and classification procedures that exceeded standard medical training. Chief, she replied. The documents relate to previous operational assignments that required specialized security clearances. There has been no compromise of classified information, but the classification markings were inadvertently observed during a routine medical procedure. Williams understood that Lieutenant Commander Morgan was describing a situation where classified materials had been exposed to personnel who might not have appropriate clearance levels, creating a potential security incident that required careful handling. "Ma'am," Williams said, "I think we need to discuss this matter with the security officer to ensure proper procedures are followed." Over the following hours, Lieutenant Commander Morgan met with base security personnel to address the inadvertent exposure of classified materials and to determine what information could be shared to resolve the security concerns raised by Rodriguez's observation of the folder markings. The security review revealed that Lieutenant Commander Morgan possessed legitimate Omega clearance for classified operations that had been conducted during previous assignments, but that her current medical role at Coronado did not require or utilize that level of security access. The documents Rodriguez had observed were legacy materials from previous assignments that she was authorized to possess, but that were not related to current SEAL training operations. When Rodriguez was debriefed about the incident, he was told that Lieutenant Commander Morgan had served in specialized medical roles that required the highest levels of security clearance, but that specific details of those assignments remained classified and could not be disclosed without appropriate authorization. "What I can tell you," the security officer explained to Rodriguez, "is that Lieutenant Commander Morgan has served in medical capacities that supported some of the most sensitive operations conducted by United States Special Operations Forces. Her current assignment to SEAL training represents a transition to conventional medical duties, but her security clearances reflect previous involvement in classified operations." The information that Rodriguez was authorized to receive fundamentally changed his understanding of Lieutenant Commander Morgan and raised questions about what kind of medical assignments would require Omega clearance and involvement in black operations. Over the following days, Rodriguez shared his experience with other SEAL candidates, describing the incident in general terms while respecting the classification restrictions that prevented him from disclosing specific details. The knowledge that their medical officer possessed the highest levels of security clearance and had been involved in classified operations created a new level of respect and curiosity about Lieutenant Commander Morgan's background. "I always wondered why Doc Morgan seemed so calm under pressure," commented Petty Officer Jackson, one of Rodriguez's fellow candidates. "Now I understand that she's probably dealt with situations that make our training look easy by comparison." Petty Officer Thompson, who had previous special operations experience, was particularly intrigued by the revelation. "Omega clearance isn't something they give to medical personnel unless they're directly involved in the most classified operations we conduct," he said. Whatever assignments she had before coming here, they were probably more dangerous and sensitive than anything we'll ever be authorized to know about. The candidates began paying closer attention to Lieutenant Commander Morgan's behavior and professional demeanor, looking for signs of the operational experience that her security clearances suggested. They noticed that her responses to medical emergencies were extraordinarily calm and efficient, that her knowledge of trauma medicine exceeded typical Navy medical training, and that she possessed situational awareness that seemed more tactical than clinical. Master Chief Petty Officer Davis, who supervised the medical support for SEAL training, eventually approached Lieutenant Commander Morgan to discuss whether her previous experience could contribute to enhancing the medical training provided to SEAL candidates. "Lieutenant Commander," Davis said, "I understand that your background includes specialized medical experience that might be relevant to preparing our candidates for operational medicine requirements. Would you be willing to discuss how your previous assignments might enhance our training programs?" Lieutenant Commander Morgan considered the request carefully, understanding that Davis was asking her to share operational experience that could benefit current SEAL training while respecting the classification restrictions that governed her previous assignments. "Master Chief," she replied, "I'd be willing to contribute to training programs that could benefit from specialized medical experience, within the constraints of what information can be appropriately shared." Over the following weeks, Lieutenant Commander Morgan began working with training staff to develop enhanced medical training scenarios that reflected the realities of providing emergency medical care in high-stress operational environments. While she could not discuss specific details of her previous assignments, her approach to medical training revealed experience with combat medicine, trauma care under extreme conditions, and decision-making in life-and-death situations. What Lieutenant Commander Morgan brings to our training, Master Chief Davis explained to the SEAL candidates, is practical experience in medical situations that reflect the challenges you may face during actual operations. Her background has prepared her to teach medical skills that go beyond standard Navy medical training. The enhanced medical training that Lieutenant Commander Morgan developed included realistic scenarios where SEAL medics had to provide care while under hostile fire, decision-making exercises that tested medical personnel's ability to prioritize casualties in mass casualty situations, and advanced trauma care techniques that could be performed with minimal equipment in austere environments. Rodriguez, who had been the first to discover Lieutenant Commander Morgan's classified background, became one of her most dedicated students in the enhanced medical training programs. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said, "learning from someone who has actually applied medical skills in classified operations has completely changed my understanding of combat medicine. You've taught me techniques and decision-making approaches that I know could save lives during actual missions." The training programs that Lieutenant Commander Morgan developed were eventually adopted throughout Naval Special Warfare, enhancing the medical capabilities of SEAL teams through integration of lessons learned from the most highly classified medical operations. But perhaps Lieutenant Commander Morgan's greatest contribution was demonstrating that extraordinary operational experience often continues to serve the military mission in unexpected ways. Her transition from classified operations to SEAL training support reflected the ongoing value of specialized experience in developing the next generation of special operations personnel. The story of Lieutenant Commander Morgan's accidental revelation became part of the informal history of SEAL training at Coronado, shared as an example of how the most valuable experience often remains hidden behind routine professional responsibilities until circumstances reveal its significance. The most important lesson you can learn from this, instructors would tell new SEAL candidates, is that the people supporting your training may have operational experience that exceeds your own understanding of special operations. The medical officer treating your injuries might be someone who has provided care during operations that you don't have the clearance to know about. 6 months after the classified folder incident, Lieutenant Commander Morgan was formally recognized by Naval Special Warfare Command for her contributions to enhanced medical training capabilities. But more importantly, she had established training programs that continued to benefit SEAL teams long after her direct involvement in their development. Lieutenant Commander Morgan's legacy, explained Captain Martinez, the commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Training Center, isn't just her exceptional service in classified operations. It's her continued commitment to preparing SEAL medics for the medical challenges they'll face during their own operational assignments, using experience gained from the most sensitive medical operations conducted by our Special Operations Forces. Lieutenant Commander Morgan's response to the formal recognition reflected the mindset that had guided her entire approach to military service. "The most important thing I can do," she said, "is ensure that SEAL medics are prepared for the medical challenges they'll encounter during operations. If my previous experience can help them provide better medical care and save more lives, then sharing that experience within appropriate security constraints is the most valuable contribution I can make." Years later, when Lieutenant Commander Morgan transitioned to other assignments, her legacy lived on in the enhanced medical training programs she had developed and in the understanding that operational medicine requires preparation for challenges that conventional medical training cannot fully address. The classified folder that had accidentally fallen from her jacket became a symbol of the hidden operational experience that many military medical personnel carry with them throughout their careers. Lieutenant Commander Morgan's willingness to share her specialized knowledge when it could benefit current SEAL training demonstrated that extraordinary service continues in whatever form best serves the mission. Her story reminded everyone at Coronado that assumptions about people's backgrounds can be dangerous, and that the most valuable contributions often come from personnel whose true qualifications remain carefully concealed behind current professional responsibilities until circumstances reveal their significance. The moment when Rodriguez had frozen upon seeing the words Black Ops, Clearance, Omega had lasted only seconds, but its impact continued for years, reminding everyone that extraordinary operational experience often awaits discovery, and that the people providing routine support may be the same people who participated in the most classified missions in military history. Lieutenant Commander Morgan's transformation from routine medical support to recognized operational medical expert demonstrated that the most profound military experience often remains hidden until accidents reveal its continued relevance to current operations. This story was brought to you by Silent Salute. Before we leave you today, here's our question. Have you ever discovered that someone you knew in a routine medical or support capacity actually possessed extraordinary operational experience that they kept classified? Have you encountered military personnel whose true backgrounds were far more remarkable than their current assignments suggested? Tell us in the comments about the moments when you realized you'd been working alongside someone whose operational history exceeded your understanding of military service. And if you believe that some secrets are revealed through the smallest accidents, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. Every story reminds us that extraordinary military service often continues in hidden forms, and that the people we take for granted may be the ones whose experiences hold the most classified lessons about dedication, sacrifice, and lifelong commitment to protecting others. We'll see you in the next story where we'll discover another incredible tale of hidden operational experience and the unexpected moments when classified backgrounds are revealed through circumstances that change everything we thought we knew about the people serving alongside us.